Welcome to episode 10 of the Ego Chall Podcast. I'm Preston Byers, and I'm, as always, with Justin Binkowski. And today we're going to be talking about Stage 3 and previewing the first week of the third stage of the Call of Duty League. How you doing, Bink?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Doing pretty well. So let's first start with the groups. The CDL did a group drawing, as they do before every stage, to figure out where the 12 teams are going to be playing for Stage 3 group play. And in Group A, the 6 teams are the defending Stage 2 champions, the Toronto Ultra, the Dallas Empire, the Minnesota Rocker, the Florida Mutineers, Paris Legion, and Los Angeles Guerrillas. And in Group B, Atlanta FaZe, Op Chicago, the LA Thieves, the New York Subliners, Seattle Surge, and the London Royal Ravens. What are your overall thoughts on the group split here?
Yeah, so I really just wanted to bring this up before we get into our predictions, just so everybody knows what they are. I mean, we have the graphic if you want to pull it up, but if not, it's no big deal.
Yeah, give me a second.
The only major thing that I was going to point out was obviously they did the group selection show again, and because Toronto won Stage 2 Major, they were automatically put in Group A. FaZe went into Group B, and Toronto had the first pick of the group selection show, and they chose to send Optic to FaZe's group right away. So I thought that was interesting for multiple reasons. Obviously, Optic didn't technically come in third in the Major, which, you would think if you have that first pick to send over another team, you might want to send over the third best team since, you're technically the top team in the game at the moment. Then you have the second team already in that group, so you'd want to get rid of like that next competitor probably. But Toronto beat Optic in the Major in the winners bracket to start things off. So it's not like they were trying to, at least in my eyes, maybe they think they're a tougher matchup than like Dallas or Minnesota, but they beat those teams too, so I guess they really had whatever pick they wanted to make there. But I just thought it was interesting they sent Optic over. And then because of that breakdown, and Optic not technically being the third ranked team from the Major, Group A consists of 3 of the teams that placed in the top 4 at the Stage 2 Major. So Toronto, Dallas, and Minnesota. The only one they don't have is second place FaZe, obviously. And then Group B has FaZe, and then the next 4 teams in Group B are the teams that placed, both teams that placed top 6, which were Optic and LA Thieves, and then both teams that placed top 8 in New York and Seattle. So I just thought it was interesting how it ended up playing out like that, and I wanted to just point that out because I thought it was interesting.
Just from like I guess an organizational standpoint, when you look at it, you would think, oh man, Group B is really stacked. You have FaZe, Optics, Subliners, Thieves, but pretty much all of those teams except FaZe, I guess, has underperformed in Stage 2. I guess FaZe underperformed because they didn't win, but like Optic got beat when before they thought they should. LA Thieves, I guess, they overperformed for the expectations for that roster, but as a whole, coming into Stage 2, I don't think they would have been satisfied with top 6. And then the Subliners, they literally got double swept at the Major. Yep. So Group A, just from like a recent standpoint, it's actually a more difficult group, at least on paper, because the Empire is obviously very good while kind of having their ups and downs. And we saw a lot of good things from the Rocker. And we don't really know what to expect with Havoc coming into the lineup for Florida and Paris making their change as well. So, it's interesting to kind of look and see, like, back in the old days, I guess, where you'd have these open brackets and you'd be like, oh, what's the group of death? Like, everybody would look at the group drawing and like, okay, Group A with like Optic, Luminosity, FaZe, like that's the group of death. Like that group is going to be so difficult. And in this case, because there's only 2 groups, you could make a case for either that it's more difficult to come out in the top 3 in either group.
Yeah, the Call of Duty League is just so much more competitive this year compared to previous years because obviously with the switch back to 4v4 and no expansion where you're only having 12 teams, so 48 pros in the league going down from 60 last year. So you really have the best of the best when you're looking in that aspect. And just to piggyback off what you were saying, I think Group A has the more solidified, like Toronto, Dallas, and Minnesota should be top 3 in that group, and then Florida, Paris, and LAG are going to have to try to play spoiler, especially if those 3 teams, well, at least 2 of those teams have made changes. A third one is potentially making a change, according to reports. So they're going to be looking to play spoiler, cause some upsets. But like Group A has that solidified top 3 teams in my mind, like based off of going on paper coming into stage 3. But Group B, it really, I mean, FaZe and Optic should come in the top 3 of Group B, but then it comes down to who's going to grab that 3rd spot, right? Because you have this LA Thieves roster, which, you know, they went on their run at the major, but that was still like the only time we've seen this 4 stack of players play. Then we have the revamped New York roster coming in. Seattle didn't make any changes. They look good at times in stage 2. And then who's the last team in that group? Is it London?
Yeah, it's London.
London's also making a change. They now have half of Westar in there. So, yeah, I mean, potentially any of those 4 teams could, you know, cause some upsets or sneak into that 3rd spot. But I just think compared to Group A, Group B doesn't have that like solidified. These 3 teams should make the upper winners bracket of the stage 3 major.
Yeah, the roster changes really throw a wrench into people's predictions of, you know, they don't really know what to expect. I certainly don't know what to expect out of some of these rosters. Even the ones that didn't make a roster change, I don't know what to really expect out of them and how and where they'll be at the end of stage 3 group play, excuse me, in the major, because I mean last split or last stage, I guess, at the major, I thought Subliners were a top 2 team, and they got swept both times. So I don't really know exactly what to expect, and especially with these new rosters, I think it just like adds another layer of unpredictability to everything.
Just to mention it again, you thought New York was going to come in second at stage 2 major, and you thought the Gorillas were going to come in 3rd place. I just want, you know, episode 10 to reflect that prediction again.
There will be no episode 11 if this continues. All right, so let's get into Roster Mania, because you touched on it a little bit. I've touched on it a little bit. There's been some confirmation from teams about who's going to be starting in their roster, and we actually don't know about every roster. We haven't seen confirmation from every team about their starting roster for stage 3. Let's start with the confirmations that we do have, though. The Paris Legion, they're going to be starting Temp in their lineup with Aqua, Scraps, and Classic. He replaces Fire, who the Paris Legion completely released, and he's now back in Challengers. And we also have Florida replacing Slacked with Havoc, but Slacked will be on the bench. I don't know if that was confirmed, but from the wording Slacked had in his tweet, I think he said that he had been benched. And Havoc is being inserted in the lineup. Havoc obviously played all of the first season of the CDL with the Mutineers. So what do you think about these 2 roster changes? I know we touched on it a little bit last week. So what do you think about Temp and Havoc coming into the lineups?
Yeah, we don't have to spend too much time on Paris. I think we said everything we need to last week. I think on a couple levels, like that's what my big point last week was, that this could be a change similar to Standy joining Minnesota, in the sense that it affects multiple roles, because with Temp coming in to replace Fire, Scraps can, if they go down this road, obviously we don't know for sure, but it seems most likely that Scraps will be moving to the flex, and Temp and Classic will be that sub duo. So this could be like the move that not only, you know, helps Temp sort of, you know, show what he can do with a sub, but also allows Scraps to perform in that flex role too, similar to what happened with like Standy coming in from Major Maniac in Minnesota, and then Priest moving to flex. Priest's numbers went up, so something similar could happen with Scraps. We'll obviously have to wait and see, but I think that could be a good change, especially, you know, we touched on it last week too, with Temp having previous experience playing with Aqua and Classic. Overall, I think this is a positive change for Paris, especially for a franchise that didn't make any moves last year at all during franchising. I think it's a good step forward, regardless of who they ended up signing. Even though I like Temp as a player, I think it's just a good move to see them actually want to make a change. Like, they're underperforming. They're not just staying complacent. They're going out and being proactive and trying to switch things up. The Florida change, on the other hand, we talked about this on the last episode too, but we didn't know for sure who was going to replace Select. Crone had reported that it could have been potentially Havoc, Yeez, or Decimate. I had said that I thought Decimate out of those three would probably be my pick, but I see, it's kind of, how do I want to word it? I think it was like Havoc and Decimate could be similar players in the sense that they're both strong search and destroy players. So that mode should improve for Florida by bringing them into the lineup. Obviously, Slacked has been a part of a lot of teams throughout his career that haven't necessarily been the best search teams. Not saying that was the problem with Florida at all, but obviously bringing in Havoc should help them improve in search. But I still am not sure, who's going to step up and be the leader on that team. Obviously, Neptune's a rookie, switched over from Halo, so he doesn't have a lot of Call of Duty experience at all, and most likely wouldn't be able to fill those, the leadership shoes that this team might need. Awakening is in, I don't even know if it's been a full year since he's been in the CDL technically, because he was a mid-season pickup for them last year. And then you have Skies, and Skies is kind of like, he's a solid main AR player, but he still hasn't, been like in the league for a super long time, and isn't necessarily a veteran presence. So Havoc comes into this team and becomes like, the longest tenured player just in terms of like since how long he's been around compared to everybody else. So that's what I'm going to have my eyes on for Florida. I want to see who steps up to be the leader this team might need. But, at the end of the day, who knows? Maybe they don't need a leader. They just need, 4 guys who are on the same page frying. But it'll definitely be interesting to see how this revamped roster performs. And especially I want to see how Florida plays in search with Havoc.
I think there's also a bit of familiarity with Havoc, considering he played with Awakening and Skies last year on the I guess the first season of the Mutineers roster. So it's not like they're bringing in someone that they don't know how he plays. That they know exactly how he plays. Maybe not as much with this game, but in general, they know what he's going to bring to the team. It should be interesting. I really like Havoc, and he seems to be a good player. And they had a lot of success last year at the home series events, so maybe they'll be able to do something similar in stage 3 and beyond. So we'll see. Let's hop over to London though. This is a new roster change. We didn't have the chance to talk about this last week because it actually just dropped today. So the London Royal Ravens, or yesterday, excuse me. The Royal Ravens, they're replacing Dylan, who was on their roster the entirety of season 1 up till now. They're replacing him with Wester player Zaptius. So London's actually having like this Wester connection because they also had Paul X on their roster. He was on Wester before. So this is a pretty big change. I think we had touched on it, and I think you mentioned that like Clayster said like Shawnee and Dylan seem to have a connection or something. Like it was something along those lines. Is that and Dylan?
Zed joined in, yeah.
Yeah. So for Dylan to be replaced, at one time during Black Ops 4, he was up for the debate of being the best player in the world, like not best European player, just best player. He was that dominant. He helped his team so much. A lot of things have changed. London in general has been pretty poor this season. They didn't win a match in stage 1. They looked better in stage 2, but then they didn't have a good performance in the stage 2 major. And now they're making this change. They're swapping out Dylan with Zaptius. What do you think of Zaptius coming into the roster and that continued Wester connection for London?
Yeah, I really didn't expect this change at all, to be honest. I feel like, obviously, if we look at the standings, like, Seattle's at the bottom, but London is at the very bottom right now. So, like, it makes sense that they wanted to make another change. last week when we were talking about roster changes, though, we hadn't heard any reports or anything. It didn't necessarily seem like they were going to make an immediate change. So I was a little caught off guard by it, but I'm really happy for Zaptius in particular. I think he's a really solid player. Obviously, we saw him a little bit on that midnight esports roster at the end of Black Ops 4, but other than that, he's been in the amateur scene since then. So this is kind of his return to pro play in a sense, and he's again, another strong search and destroy player who could help London in that mode in particular. And you kind of said it there with Dylan. He was kind of like the superstar player in Black Ops 4, but we really haven't seen that level of performance out of Dylan on a consistent basis since Black Ops 4. He's had his moments where he's popped off in certain games, but he's also had some games where he's really struggled. So I'm not sure really what the direction of London is, in the sense that obviously they've made a lot of changes this year.
Yeah.
It seems like they're throwing contracts out there and just trying to see what gels and what sticks. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously we have half of West Star there with Zaptius and Paul X now. So it'll be interesting to see how they gel with the two Europeans and Shawnee and Zed. But yeah, they face an uphill battle in my opinion. Obviously, we kind of touched on it with the groups. I think it's a little better for them. They might struggle against Atlanta and FaZe in group play, but they have a shot to play against two newer teams. Obviously, we saw them get reverse swept by the new LA Thieves roster in the Stage 2 Major, but they have another chance to play a new roster in New York, and then they're playing Seattle, who's down towards the bottom of the standings with them as well. So they have a shot. If this team's able to click right away, they have a chance to maybe get some wins in Stage 3. But I'm excited to see what Zaptius can do.
To kind of just piggyback off of what you were saying, and maybe there's a new viewer or people that haven't followed the CDL in a while, just to give you a little background information. London, their original roster of what they signed, it was going to be Shawnee, Alex, Dylan, and Zero. Zero had visa issues. He's still not. He's not been able to come to America, so he hasn't been able to join London. So they bring in Parasite as a temporary substitute. And they didn't know when Zero would be able to come into the country. So Parasite comes in, and they don't win any matches like I said in Stage 1. And then Zed comes in for the Stage 1 Major on an emergency substitute for Alex, who has to go back to Europe for personal matters. So Zed comes in, they lose their one match at the Stage 1 Major, and then Parasite gets dropped essentially, or he doesn't get re-signed to his I believe it was he was getting signed to 10-day contracts essentially.
2-week contracts,
yeah. So they don't sign him. They sign Wester player Paul X, who is currently on the team. And they do show some signs of life. They come a lot closer to winning. They do win some. It looks a lot better, but they didn't have a great end to Stage 2. And so now they're feeling like they have to switch it up. In total, according to Cody Sports Gamepedia, on their roster they have 8 players this season, and 9 players including Parasite. 8. So they have Afro, who is a European Challengers player. He hasn't been on the team or on the main roster, but he was signed in January as a substitute. You have Zero, who hasn't played because of visa issues. Dylan, who just got benched. Alex, who's away for personal reasons. And then the starting lineup is now Zaptius, Paul X, Zed, and Shawnee. It's kind of crazy. I'm very glad, though, that they're not just kind of throwing in the towel, because I think there was I think it would be understandable in their case of they want to build a European brand, and I think that's clear from who they've signed and how they've gone about things. But in this COVID-19 restricted kind of way of doing things, where people aren't able to get into the country nearly as easily as they used to be, I think it's smart just to be well, these guys are already here, and maybe they can help our team get to get to champs and be able to qualify for the CDL playoffs, because the bottom four teams aren't even going to make it, and you don't want to be one of those four teams because it just looks poorly. Even though people would understand London not making it to the playoffs, in reality it would still sting if you're a London fan or you're one of the people in management. You don't want to see your team basically not even get to compete in the biggest event of the year. So I'm glad that they're not throwing in the towel. I'm very interested to see if this will be the move to help them, though.
Yep.
So let's move on to New York. This is not confirmed. We have not really got any confirmation about what this roster is going to be, but it appears that it's going to be Clayster, Asim, Mac, and Hydra. So that would mean that Diamond Khan would be on the bench. He is a rookie. He showed some good things this season so far, but it looks like they're going to bring in another rookie, Hydra, who was like Zero. He was delayed. He wasn't able to get into the country because of COVID-19 visa issues. So it looks like it's going to be Clay, Asim, Mac, and Hydra for New York. What are you thinking about this lineup? I know we talked last week about a different iteration and some rumors. So what do you think about Hydra coming in?
Yeah, so really, like you said, we haven't heard any confirmation from New York, but Asim in particular tweeted out a clip today from scrims of New York playing against Toronto, and the lineup was Clayster, Mac, Hydra, and Asim. So it looks like that's going to be New York's lineup heading into Stage 3. We obviously don't know for sure, but that seems like the direction it's going in. And I'm kind of indifferent. I don't know if Diamond Khan was necessarily the problem with the team.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more just a case that, like, you have Hydra. He's supposed to be the French phenom, like he's supposed to be this next up-and-coming talent. And after going 0-6 map count in the Stage 2 Major, New York wanted to find a way to get Hydra in the lineup and see what he can do. So Diamond Khan might have been the odd man out, just in that sense that they want to see Hydra's potential. We heard rumors last week that it might have been Hydra coming in for Mac, and then there was rumors of Sib being signed by New York too, and then it was going to be Sib and Hydra replacing Mac and Diamond Khan. I said this last week too. I just think the most important thing for New York out of this change is that Hydra isn't replacing Asim. I think Asim's really showed what he's capable of this year so far. He's that aggressive sub player who's going to set the pace for your team. He's played really well statistically too this year, but he's not that player who's always going to go off. He's going to do the dirty work and do whatever the team needs him to do, regardless of how it impacts his stats. So that's why he might have in the past, some people might not have looked at him in a certain way or thought he was like a top player, whatever the case may be. I'm really happy that New York is A, giving Hydra a shot, and B, it didn't come at the expense of Asim, because I think that would have been it might have been the easier move to make, just because based on what we've heard about Hydra, they might have like a similar play style on both being aggressive subs, but I know Hydra's played some like Flex and Academy or whatever. So yeah, that's how I'm looking at it. I think, obviously we've seen good moments from Diamond Khan too, and Max had his moments as well. So I'm sure this wasn't an easy decision, whatever decision New York ends up making. I just think this is more the case of they're trying to see what they have in Hydra, and all eyes are going to be on him going into Stage 3.
If we would have said, okay, so New York, they finished third at the Stage 1 Major, and after that, I think we both came to the conclusion of they can't put Hydra in when they're hot. It doesn't make any sense to kind of ruin this team's momentum. And then they ruined their own momentum. They finish 0-6 at the Stage 2 Major. They get top 8. And that was after having the second best record in Stage 2 group play. So, I don't think the original roster, I don't think that it could have, I think it could have been salvaged. So I think there was room to improve for that roster, and they could come back and still be a good team. But like you said, they have to see what they have in Hydra, because there's been so much hype around this kid. It'll be disappointing if he's even average in my eyes, just because there has been like a lot of excitement around like this new prospect. And we tend to, I said this about Fire, I think at the beginning of the year, like we shouldn't expect every rookie to be like the next coming of Simp or anything.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't put that much pressure on them. But I'm just very excited to see if New York can figure it out and change. It's really only one event. One event tainted everything essentially because they go 4-1 in stage 2 group play and then they lose back to back at the major. And now you're thinking, well, like, are they good enough? I mean, they're obviously good enough. They beat Optic in stage 1. They should have beaten Empire in stage 1 group play. They choked that game. So like, there's really a lot of potential with this original roster, but I agree with you. Like, you can't just let Hydra just waste away in Academy and kind of play the what if game at the end of the year about like, well, is he even good enough? Like, should we put him in the starting roster? I guess this is his chance to prove if he's good enough or not.
Yeah, and I think importantly too, if we look at the standings, that New York is in 4th place right now, technically tied for 3rd with Optic Chicago at 140 points. So they have some leeway to kind of experiment with their roster. And it seems like, obviously we still don't have confirmation, but it seems like that's what they're trying to do here, just see what they have in Hydra. So it's not like, they're not in London's position where they have to make changes to try to get into that top 8, like you said, to qualify for champs. New York is in like a decent position right now where they have points. Like 8th place right now is LA Gorillas with 70, so they're literally double the points at that cutoff. So like they have room to give Hydra time to adjust if he needs it, whatever the case may be. So it seems like if this is the decision they want to make, giving him his shot, that this is the good time to do it. After they had their struggles at the major, and instead of, just running the same lineup out there and potentially struggling again, they're being proactive and saying, okay, we're going to give Hydra a shot. And who knows, maybe New York struggles with Hydra and they go back to Diamond Con or something. I guess we won't know for a little bit, but, like I said just a couple minutes ago, all eyes are definitely going to be on Hydra if and when he makes his CDL debut.
Let's move on to the Los Angeles Gorillas. This is from our boy Crone. He said yesterday, according to sources, very high chance Vivid will no longer be starting for the Gorillas. Unclear who would take his place, but likely a player from their academy team. Like we said before, LAG is, I believe, the only team to actually field an entire academy team this year. Oh, New York as well. So New York and LAG are the only teams. LAG actually has Chino and I think Mental as their substitutes in the CDL, 2 of their academy players. This was out of left field because we both came to the conclusion that LAG, although they're not doing well in the standings and they ruined my hopes and dreams at the stage 2 major, we were assuming they were going to stick with their 4, and that was how it was going to be in stage 3. It seems to be not the case. So what are you thinking about Vivid being replaced, and do you have any idea of like who you would like to see him get replaced with? I don't really know.
No. Yeah, that's the thing here. I was completely thrown off by this. Didn't expect it at all. I feel like Vivid has been the Gorillas' best and most consistent player throughout the season so far. Silly has definitely performed better than some people might have expected, especially, like during the M4 meta. He kind of shined as a flex. And he's definitely performed well in some searches, obviously. They beat FaZe, whatever. But yeah, I really am speechless just thinking of the fact that the Gorillas might decide to bench Vivid because, we talked about it before, just the core 3 of this Gorillas team is that EG lineup that won champs in 2018, right? That was Aches, Assault, Silly, and Apathy. And coming into the season, the Gorillas decided to get rid of everyone from their MW team except Vivid and bring in those 3 guys from EG. So it seemed like, from putting those moves together, it seems like Vivid is like that franchise player they're trying to build around. And now they might be benching him. Like, that's especially it's not like he's been struggling this year. Like, sure, there've been games where the Gorillas have gotten stomped and everyone on the team has underperformed. But I think even like just off the top of my head, I can't think of the numbers, but there have been series where like the Gorillas lost and Vivid was the only guy on the team who had a positive KD. I know stats don't mean everything, but I can't wrap my head around the thought process there. Obviously, we won't know until something is announced. You mentioned that the Gorillas might have said that like something was going on, like a medical issue or something with someone on the Gorillas Academy. So like maybe something behind the scenes is happening that's forcing this roster move. We don't know. So definitely, let me look real quick at the schedule. The Gorillas don't play till Saturday, so it might be a couple days until we hear anything. We might not necessarily hear anything before Saturday or even up until the moment of their actual match. But it'll definitely, everyone's going to be having their eyes on this, whatever happens here, trying to figure out what's going on. And to answer your other questions, I don't know who the Gorillas bring in. The academy team hasn't been like one of the like they've had their moments and they've had some decent placements in challengers, but they also haven't like I'm pretty sure they haven't like won a lot of events or anything. So I don't know who they bring in. Obviously, Cheen is the biggest name on that academy team, but then you're bringing in a main AR player for like one of your sub slayers. So like from a role standpoint, that doesn't make sense. Maybe they bring Mental in and like just see what he can do, but I certainly, obviously he's coming from Gears, and I certainly haven't heard like anything like, oh my God, Mental's like the best player in Academy. I haven't heard anything crazy about him, so I'm not really sure how he's performing in his transition. So they have Exceed too, who played for Minnesota last year when they brought him in for GodRx. So maybe from a role standpoint, Exceed makes sense to bring him in for Vivid. But I don't know if that's an upgrade or how that affects the team. So this is definitely something we're going to have to keep our eyes on.
To give a little context about LAG Academy, they've really underperformed this season. They actually hadn't placed in the money of any challengers event until the most recent one, which was the second open event. They finished top 8 at the most recent open event. At the cups, the last cup they competed in, top 128. They got top 16 the one before that, top 128 before that. It's not been great for them, but I mean, just because a team performs poorly does not mean that every player or any player can't be of use to the main roster. So I don't want to say that, but just also the LAG Academy roster, like you said, is Nero, Cheen, Mental, and why am I blanking on the last one now? Exceed. Yeah. So that's the 4 for LAG Academy, and Chino and Mental are considered substitutes for the Gorillas main roster. So I guess they wouldn't have to technically call up either of them. It's really crazy. I just checked Breaking Point's website, and I just wanted to see the stats while you were talking. Vivid has the third highest, or I guess the second lowest KD on the team, but he averages the most hardpoint kills, so he's kind of he's the aggressive player. He's like what Abizi is basically for FaZe. He's going to get a lot of kills, he's going to get a lot of deaths. You just hope that it works out for your team's favor. So like he also averages the most hardpoint damage on his team. So that's just to give a little context. Like you, I have no idea who they replaced him with. I haven't really followed much challengers. I definitely haven't followed much LAG Academy. So I couldn't really tell you if one of their players could really help LAG. And, I thought they shouldn't make a change anyway, considering how, like, beating FaZe and winning 2 matches in group play is no small feat for LAG. I think I've been saying this all year that I think they're one of the best S&D teams, or they have the potential to be, just because we've seen what this EG core and Bevels, what they can come up with. So yeah, it's really surprising for Vivid of all people to be benched, and right before the third stage, and really no warning at all coming from this.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously nothing's confirmed yet, so
Yeah.
like come Saturday, we could easily see Vivid still playing alongside us all, Apathy and Silly. We're just gonna have to wait till then, most likely, or until there's an announcement to figure out what's going on.
The final roster change that we're going to talk about is that the LA Thieves, who placed top 6 at the Stage 2 Major, appear to be sticking with their Stage 2 Major roster. This was kind of a weird roster. We didn't really know what to make of it when it happened, because they actually had to bench, or they didn't have to, I guess, but they benched Slasher to bring in Draza. So the roster is Draza, Kenny, TJ Haley, and Venom, and then they have Slasher on the bench, and they parted ways with Temp, who started for them this season as well. So this is the last roster change. Do you have any overall thoughts on LAT sticking with their roster?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a roster change, right? Like they're sticking with this lineup, and I think that's the biggest element here. We weren't sure when they made the change with Slasher. They obviously went into the Stage 2 Major on very limited practice, so we weren't sure if this was going to be the 4-man lineup that they ran back in Stage 3, but it certainly looks like that's the case. They released their video yesterday of 0 to 100, and obviously going through like the major, they took down Paris, London, New York, and then they got swept by Toronto, who went down or who went on to win the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of seemed like afterwards they were just like talking about, okay, we got to focus now on Stage 3 and see what we can do. So it certainly seems like they're going to stick with this lineup. For me, a lot of people are going to be looking at how Draza continues to perform, since he has, pretty big shoes to fill in the sense of just coming in for Slasher. But we still have to keep an eye on Kenny, transitioning to this main AR role, however you want to look at the role debate that JCap has brought up. Whatever the case may be, we're going to have to see how Kenny performs against some of these other top ARs in the league. Obviously, if you're looking at it on paper, he went up against Aqua, who Aqua's performed pretty well this year. Not taking anything away from him. But then on London, he, faced off against Shawnee, who, some people may not consider like the best main AR in the league. But then he has to go against Clayster, and the Thieves were able to sweep New York, or obviously they were struggling or going through issues, whatever was going on at the major. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Kenny stacks up to some of these main ARs in his group. Obviously, you'll have to go up against guys like Arcides and Formal and Octane in group play. So that's what a lot of people, especially Thieves fans, will be looking out for in Stage 3 to see how this roster continues to gel. Was the Stage 2 major run a fluke, or is this team a legit top 6 threat?
Mm-hmm.
That's one question we're going to have to keep our eyes on moving forward, and, still trying to figure out how this roster is going to perform and, who's going to play what role, all that.
Yeah. So we're going to see Paris and Florida debut a new lineup, as well as London. Those are confirmed. New York, probably going to see Hydra make his CDL debut. We don't really know what to expect from LAG, and we're going to see LAT stick. The other 6 teams, so LAT plus Atlanta, Dallas, Optic Chicago, Toronto, the Minnesota Rocker, and the Seattle Surge, as far as we know, are making no changes to their starting rosters. At least most of those teams were in the top 6 at the major, so it makes sense why they wouldn't make that change. Seattle is the notable outlier of sticking with their roster, but they did, like you said earlier in the show, they showed potential during the stage, and they picked up some wins, and they probably should have picked up some more wins, to be honest. They had some really close calls. So that's what the roster update is. Let's quickly go into the kind of current meta and like what's going on for season 3 of Black Ops Cold War. So we talked about this on, I think, 2 episodes ago or 3 episodes ago. How there was a patch with weapon balance changes, And you were really gassing the Milano. You were saying like this gun is absolutely disgusting. We showed a clip on or two clips on stream of it, but it hasn't been used in CDL. The patch hasn't been used in CDL. Um, do you think it will? Do you think the Milano will come into play during stage 3 or stage 4 of the CDL? And you can also talk about the control changes since that's something that's been around, but it just hasn't been in the CDL.
Yeah, so that's all I wanted to bring up real quick was just reiterating the fact that there was a pretty big update in Black Ops Cold War at the end of March, but that update wasn't used in stage 2 because they were already like in the middle of the stage. So they continued playing that out, and now the update will most likely be used for stage 3. So that's what most notably it will be interesting to see how I believe the Krieg was also buffed a little bit in the update. But it seems like the M4, AK-47, and the QBZ are all GA'd right now, so there shouldn't be any effect on the AR meta. We'll most likely continue to see the Krieg used there, but we might see a Milano thrown into the mix, and that's what I'm excited to see. The 74U I still think is a better gun. It just obviously was hit a little bit, and the Milano was buffed, so it makes the Milano just a little bit more viable. And we saw guys like Envoy. I can't even remember. Was it just called the Uzi in MW? I don't even remember. But like in parts of MW, we saw Envoy, branch out a little bit and use another submachine gun, even though the MP5 was so dominant. So that's just one player off the top of my head who might be this guy who tries out the Milano in league matches. But that's I just think, because it got buffed, and I think it does have the potential to be used in a competitive setting, it will be interesting to see if teams actually decide to use it.
Yeah. On the control changes, just to explain it real quick. So overtime was determined by the number of kills. So the team that had more kills at the end of 4 rounds would get defense of control in round 5. So their kills will not determine overtime defensive round. It will now be the number of ticks that a team gets in the previous 4 rounds. And then another change is no time will be added every tick like it was before. So I mean, you already played with this kind of setting in league play, I would assume. So like what?
No.
That's
what I went in tonight just to double check. And control in league play still has the settings where you get 20 seconds per tick.
Okay.
So we haven't really seen it. Obviously, if people have been streaming scrims or we've watched it, some people might have seen it in action. But these group play matches will technically be our first real opportunity to see how revamped control plays out.
Sweet. I much prefer having overtime at least determined by the objective and rather than kills. I hate kills being added because it just gets really campy, but that's just a personal opinion. Yeah. Teams will literally just kind of camp and try to get as many kills and not die and not even worry about the objective once they know they can't win that round. So hopefully this changes things. It makes players more aggressive and try to go for points rather than kills. So I guess we'll see in stage 3. Another thing is the PPSH, which was the gun to use, or the SMG to use in World War II. Kenny was absolutely disgusting. That's one memory that sticks out, is like his incredible run on, I believe it was London Docks at Champs, just being absolutely filthy with it. And also probably the second best map in Call of Duty history, Standoff, coming in into the season, won't be involved in stage 3. It hasn't been announced as stage 3 yet, so it'll probably be a stage 4 thing, we would hope. So what do you think of Standoff in the PPSH?
Yeah, so that's just real quick. I wanted to touch on that because like you said, we don't know when Standoff is actually going to come into Black Ops Cold War, let alone the CDL. We have touched on it earlier. Standoff is such an iconic map in Call of Duty competitive history that we wanted to see this remade and implemented in the CDL immediately. And And I had said previously that I thought stage 3 was going to be the cutoff. So I didn't want to see standoff added like at the very end of the life cycle of Black Ops Cold War and us only like get to see it at champs or something like that. So I think right now, I hope based on timing, stage 3, we have 3 weeks of group play, and then the week for the double elim major, and then a week off, and then the following week. So like in 6 weeks, right? Did I say that right? 3 weeks for group play, the 4th week, the 5th week off. So like 5.5 weeks, we cycle back. Stage 4 group play will start. I hope by then that standoff is added to Cold War as well as added to the CDL map pool, because we've seen in both instances, I don't have the dates off the top of my head, but I know Raid was added in Season 1, and it was almost immediately added like that same day to the competitive map pool. But then Express was added in like the mid-season update for Season 1, and we didn't see Express added until like later. It wasn't as immediately added to the CDL map pool like Raid was. So my hope is just that we get standoff in the CDL almost immediately, at least for hardpoint S&D. Obviously, Control wasn't a thing in Black Ops 2, so we don't know how standoff's going to play in Control, but I certainly want to see standoff used for hardpoint search. And then the PPSH will be added right away when Season 3 of Cold War starts on the 22nd. In the past, we haven't really seen DLC weapons used that frequently in competitive play. Most of the pros just like GA or don't even bother touching them for whatever reason, because usually a lot of the DLC weapons are just super overpowered. So
yeah,
I hope that the PPSH isn't like super overpowered, but I hope it's a viable option. Just based on like, you know, how many people like that weapon in the past, I think that it would be really cool if it's released in a balanced state where it can still rival the 74U and could be a viable option. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. And then we also had news today that there could be some more weapon balance changes coming with the Season 3 update, which technically the Season 3, the way Treyarch's doing it, so like the download is available right now. It went live at midnight. But Season 3 won't actually start until midnight tomorrow, so 24 hours from now. So that's when we'll get to see, like the PPSH added and some of those other maps, not standoff, but some of the other content added. But like this update for the weapon tuning and stuff could come into play as soon as like tonight. And some of the stuff they touched on, Treyarch just like tweeted a list. They didn't go into detail about the exact balance changes that they're making, but they highlighted or previewed some of the stuff that they're going to target. And for competitive play, the two guns that jumped out to me right away were the Krieg and the FFR, which is the FAMAS. We've seen the Krieg throughout the competitive year so far.
Yeah.
The FAMAS or the FFR was kind of like used very early in Cold War's life cycle, and then it was like nerfed into the ground. And they've tried to do some changes since then, but this could be the update where we see like the Krieg get hit a little bit and the FAR gets like a little buff, and it could, balance the power of the AR class at least. Obviously we don't know what they're going to do till they release the patch notes, but that's what I'm thinking could be an option for Treyarch if they want to, try to balance out the power of the AR weapon class. So I'm excited to see that. I would love, obviously, I'm a huge fan of the FAMAS, so I would definitely love to see that back and being a viable option. But they're also targeting the SMG sprint speed and the assault rifle barrel attachments too. They said they're going to balance the shotguns and LMGs, but obviously that doesn't really matter for competitive, and they said there's going to be more changes as well. So we'll know more details, or the specific details, when the patch notes are released on Wednesday. But that's definitely going to be an interesting update, especially if it does impact two guns that could be competitively used, like the FFR and the Krieg.
Yeah, so before we move on, I just want to say for Raid, it was added December 16th into the game, and then it was added into the competitive rule set on January 7th. So almost 3 weeks exactly, but that was before the season, so like maybe, that is relatively quickly. because I mean you want to figure out like what game modes it would be good for, I guess,
Yeah.
especially since control was not a thing back then and hardpoint was literally in its infancy in Black Ops 2. So, but 3 weeks, it might be quick, sped up between stages if they try to get it in, say before stage 4 or even stage 5. I think adding it for stage 5 would be kind of pushing it, just because I mean that is the final stage, correct? So that would be
Yeah.
the final stage before champs, and you don't want to kind of add a new map in like the final 3 or 4 weeks of the season. So that'd be a little weird, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, I guess. So I just wanted to add that in real quick before we
Yep.
move on. And to Chermer's question, does standoff make control and where will the points be? I agree with him. AS and D, which is the cube by the little playground thing on, I guess if you're by the optic van side of the map, then that would be on the right side of the map. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then probably, I mean, I think P1's the front yard, right? Or is
Yeah,
that
like I think
in front of
no,
the
is
house?
that the last one?
So what's P1, Trim? I thought P1 was, yeah. So,
Yeah, it is. Okay.
so they're not very far apart, but
Yeah.
they're also like the most like rectangular parts of the map. I guess they could go onto the street by like garage area or whatever.
I feel like that would be really tough for.
Yeah, it's really tough to figure out a control for most older maps, because I mean it's not made for it. And I mean truthfully, a lot of the current control maps don't seem to be made for control either. So I don't know what's going on with that. So yeah,
All I know is I just want to see standoff back in the rotation.
yeah, it should
and
definitely be a hardpoint search map for sure.
I want to see a best of 5 series that ends in a 3-0 sweep with like standoff, hardpoint, express, search and destroy, and then raid control. Just a
Yeah.
3-0 Black Ops 2 series. I think that'd be really cool to see.
Yeah, we need some old heads to be in that series though, so we can really experience it.
Maybe when the Gorillas give Aches a call and he replaces Vivid to reunite that EG team.
Yeah, not gonna happen, but yeah, we can dream. So we're almost an hour in, so let's actually get to stage 3, week 1 matches. As always, there's 10 matches over 4 days, and this will be the first week of 3. It feels like it's been forever that I've watched COD for some reason, but it's only been about a week. So yeah, there will be 10 matches. This will be the beginning of round robin group play. We touched on the groups earlier in the show. So it'll start on Thursday, April 22nd. 2 matches: Dallas Empire versus the Paris Legion, and the Stage 2 major champions, the Toronto Ultra, versus the Florida Mutineers. So 2 of these lineups are debuting new rosters. What are you thinking for Dallas versus Paris?
Yeah, so I think obviously we like to do our predictions each episode, but I think this week in particular, with so many teams making changes and then more teams potentially making changes that we don't have confirmed, it might be a little tough to make predictions, but on the other hand, it might be more straightforward. So I don't know how much we're gonna necessarily have to say about these matches,
Yeah.
but in particular for this first one, I think I got to give the edge to Dallas over Paris Legion. I think that match, though, will be indicative, obviously, of how well this new Paris lineup plays together. They obviously have a tough test right away, but then later on Saturday, they go up against the Gorillas, and obviously we don't know what the Gorillas lineup is going to look like. So we should get a test, or we should get, obviously our first look at this Paris lineup, and we'll immediately be able to see how they stack up against the team. Obviously Dallas didn't make it to the finals again, but they still ended with a 3rd place finish. So they're still technically one of the top teams in the game. And for a new lineup, it's one of the tougher tests if you're not going up against like FaZe or Toronto right now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go Dallas 3. I'll just say Dallas 3-1.
Yeah, like you said, it's gonna be hard to make predictions. Yeah, I mean, I would have to say Dallas, just because we don't really know how Tempa's gonna come into this roster and we don't really like a lot of these teams might have their honeymoon period, but I mean we literally just don't know what these teams look like with these rosters. So I'll say Dallas as well. Um, Toronto Ultra versus Florida. I'll say my pick first. I'll go with Toronto because I'm not going to pick against the defending champions against a team debuting a new roster, even if Havoc is a good player. So I say Toronto. What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's definitely Toronto too. Trem just linked us a tweet from CDL Intel. I can't play the volume right now to hear what Attach is saying, but he tweeted a clip that slide canceling might have been nerfed in the this update that just went live before season 3 started. So we can talk about that after we go through our predictions if we want, but that's also something that we might have to keep an eye on when stage 3 actually starts. That's definitely interesting if it is an intended change that could have major implications on some teams. But yeah, I think gotta go Toronto right now, similar to what we were just saying with Paris. Florida's coming in with this revamped lineup with Havoc and replacing Slack. And, in theory, I was thinking that Havoc could help Florida improve in Search and Destroy, but Toronto was one of the best Search and Destroy teams in the last major, and that was one of the main reasons why they were able to come away with the win at the major. So I think this will be a tough series for Florida as long as Toronto is still playing at that level that we just saw most recently from them. So I'll say Toronto 3-0.
On Friday, we have 2 matches as well. LA Thieves versus Seattle Surge and Optic Chicago versus London Royal Ravens. Let's talk about Optic versus London first because I don't think we'll disagree very much on this. I mean, I would assume you're going Optic just because London is also debuting a new roster and Optic is Optic, so you would expect at least a minimum level of gameplay. If I'm correct, I'm also going with Optic, and to be honest. So, are you thinking Optic, and is there any doubt in your mind about this lineup or this matchup with London debuting a new roster?
No, I think unless we have a situation where Optic had that off week in the middle of stage 2 where they just went 0-6 in map count and they struggled. Unless something like that happens again, I think Optic should be able to take care of business. It's obviously a tough match again. It seems like we're being a broken record saying this, but it's a new lineup going up against an established team that's performed pretty well so far this year. So I'll say Optic 3-1, maybe with Zaptius and Paul X. London's able to steal the search, but yeah, I think Optic gets the job done.
Thieves versus Surge. So neither of these teams are changing rosters from Stage 2 Major. We talked a lot about the LA Thieves and how this is a relatively new lineup for them, but Seattle is sticking with their original roster. They showed some potential in Stage 2. Who do you have between the Thieves and Surge?
I'm going to go with Seattle. But I could obviously see this one going either way. If we're looking at based on the major, Thieves are like the hotter team right now. Obviously, Seattle was able to get 1 win at the major, but LA Thieves went on to win 3 games. So even though it's a newer roster, they technically played more games recently in a highly competitive environment compared to Seattle. But at the end of the day, I still think, the chemistry with Seattle could be the thing that, propels them to a victory here. They had their moments where they looked good in stage 2. Kind of said it on multiple episodes at this point, but they came really close to beating Empire in Game 5, Round 11 in group play. And if they won that could have, Group B and stage 2 was already nuts. And that one few second difference could have completely turned the group on its head even more than it already was. So I think Seattle has the potential to continue to improve. And I think, we're not seeing Seattle go up against, like Atlanta or Chicago right away. So I think this is a good opportunity for Seattle to start strong in stage 3. And I'll say they get it done 3-2.
I'm actually going to go with the Thieves for this one. I think, like you said, this is a very even matchup, at least on paper. Neither team has looked incredible, but at least with this lineup for the Thieves, Neither team has looked bad either, at least recently. I think that Seattle has some good things working for them, but I also think that the Thieves looked really good at the major. And I know they're playing kind of like bottom tier teams just because of like where they placed in group play. But for me, I think this roster, I don't know if it's just the role change or maybe it's Draza coming in and there's kind of some like new blood in the team and like something is different and that might be a good thing like it is for some teams. So I'll say the Thieves. I'll say 3-1 in this case, but like you said, I could see it go either way as well.
Yep.
So on Saturday, we have three matches: Paris Legion versus the Los Angeles Guerrillas, Minnesota Rocker versus the Florida Mutineers, and Op Chicago versus Seattle Surge. Let's start with Paris versus LAG. We don't know what LAG's roster is going to look like, so this is very difficult. Let's just, for the sake of it, let's say Vivid is starting for LAG, just because I don't know if you could really predict something that you don't know, like a fourth of the team. So if Vivid's starting for LAG, who do you got, LAG versus Paris?
So I'm thinking I was going to pick Paris regardless of the Vivid situation that we didn't know. Obviously, like I said earlier, though, this is coming before we see Paris's first match with Temp in the lineup.
Yeah.
So if Paris comes out and they just get body slammed by Dallas, they could very easily lose to whatever iteration of the Gorillas we see on Saturday. But I think based on the question marks surrounding the Gorillas, certainly I'm going to hedge my bet on Paris. But even if Vivid plays, as long as this lineup with Temp performs the way I think it should, I think they should be able to take down the Gorillas, which the Gorillas have just been that team that's been, up and down. They've had their moments where they beat FaZe, and then they show up in the major and they crush your hopes and dreams. So we don't know what team, even if Vivid plays, we don't know what team is actually going to show up, right? We don't know how they're going to perform. So there's a lot of question marks surrounding the Gorillas, whether Vivid plays or not, regardless of that. So I'm just going to go with Paris. I'll say Paris 3-1. But I think, if Paris lets it go to Game 5 and Vivid is playing, the Gorillas should be able to close things out in Search. So it'll definitely be an interesting matchup.
I'm also going to go with Paris. I made this concession a long time ago that I shouldn't pick against them unless they're against a top team. LAG, not a top team, despite my major predictions. So I'll say Paris. This is a different roster. Like you said, we don't really know. Maybe they'll look like absolute garbage against Dallas, and then we'll be like, okay, like I could see LAG winning this match. But I believe in Temp and in just needing a change, getting out of LAT and being with Classic and Aqua and Scraps. So I'll say Paris for this one as well. And then we have Minnesota and Florida. Florida debuting a new roster. They'll have played Toronto on Thursday, so we'll see a little bit there. But Minnesota looked really good. They've looked excellent since Standy came into the lineup. So where are you thinking, Rocker or Mutineers?
I'm going to go with the Rocker. One thing I didn't touch on with Florida's previous match, obviously, they're going up against the Stage 2 winners in Toronto in their first match of the week, so that's a tough match regardless of what's happening. But we did see Skies tweet out that Big Wake might be getting fiber internet, switching from cable. So, I mean, Big Wake has already had some incredible games this year. He's absolutely gone off. And if he's upgrading the internet coming into Stage 3, he could become, go from Big Wake to Ginormous Wake very quickly. So that'll be exciting to see regardless of what happens. But at the end of the day, I still think Minnesota is the better team. Obviously, things could change once we see Florida in action. But I'm going to say Minnesota 3-1.
I would like to say Florida just because of Big Wake's fiber and just, I mean, this is like Texas formal, but you like turned up a level. But I would also say Minnesota. I mean, these predictions are so difficult because we don't really know what to expect just from a base standpoint. But then they also have a match against Toronto. If they win that Toronto match, I mean, both of us would probably be like, all right, like they could beat Minnesota for sure, but we don't know. And I'll say Minnesota just to be safe. I think I put that on my pick'em as well for Mike. So I think Minnesota wins here. They looked really good, so there's no reason to really pick against them at this point. So I'll say Minnesota. And for the last match of Saturday, Optic versus Seattle. Both of these teams play on the previous day, so I guess both of them will be able to kind of scout and see what's going on. And they could also be coming in off of wins, which would be interesting. So Seattle versus Optic, who do you have?
And we most recently saw this matchup in the Stage 2 Major, right? We saw they played in the third round of the losers bracket after Chicago lost to Toronto. And Seattle was coming off the win over Florida, but Chicago takes the win 3-1. Seattle notably took raid hardpoint for map 1, 250 to 202, but then Optic won the next 3 maps. So we've seen this recently. Both teams, unless something even crazier than, we were more unexpected than Vivid being benched by the Gorillas. Unless something unprecedented happens with, I don't even want to say Optic, but it doesn't look like Seattle's changing either. So neither of these teams should be changing from their Stage 2 major matchup that we just most recently saw. So I'm going to stick with the most recent result and say Optic takes it 3-1.
Yeah, I'm not going to pick against Optic. I don't think Seattle actually has you brought this up a while ago for like a Seattle match. I don't even remember who it was, but it was like, do you think Seattle is better in this game mode than the other team? And I couldn't figure out if they were. I didn't think they were better in any game mode than that team, and I don't think they're better at any game mode than Optic. So to win a series, it just seems very unlikely in my opinion. So I'll say Optic, probably 3-0, but I mean it might not be. I just think Optic will win. And then final 3 matches: Sunday, April 25th, the Los Angeles Thieves versus the London Royal Ravens. Atlanta FaZe versus New York Subliners, and the Toronto Ultra versus the Dallas Empire. Let's start at the top. LAT versus London. London debuting a new roster, so it makes it difficult again, but who do you have here?
I'm going to go with the Thieves. We obviously just saw this matchup too at the Stage 2 Major where London was playing with Dylan, but regardless, London won the first 2 maps, and then the Thieves were able to pull off the reverse sweep. So the Thieves have had success extremely recently, playing 3/4 of the London current roster. So I'm going to stick with the Thieves. I say they win at 3-1.
I'll just say London because I'm tired of agreeing with you, to be honest. I don't know what they'll look like with Zaptius. We've never seen London without Dylan in the lineup, so it's interesting, and it really could go either way. But there's no high expectations in my opinion for London, regardless of who Zap is and what he's done, what he did in like Black Ops 4 and everything. So I don't really have high expectations, and I think that the Western connection is just too strong, and that they're gonna come out and they're gonna beat LAT, who. It doesn't make a lot of sense considering I picked LAT over Seattle, but we're going to rock with it. London 3-1 over LAT. So we're going to go with that. Atlanta versus New York. This was actually the first match of Stage 2 group play. FaZe won 3-1. New York actually beat FaZe and Search. I believe that was Express Search. So who do you have, Atlanta versus New York?
I think you got to go with Atlanta, even though they had their technically, I'm going to say they struggled, but they really only lost that best of 9 to Toronto. So however you want to word it, Atlanta's coming off of the loss in the grand finals to Toronto. So they could, we saw Simp obviously tweet after they lost a group play match to the Gorillas that, he was going to go nuts or whatever he said, that it was just like, oh crap, we might have awoken a beast here. So I can't even imagine how they're going to try to bounce back after losing in the grand finals like that. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. Obviously we don't know for sure, but it seems like we're going to be seeing a new iteration of the subliners, and if that's Hydra's first official CDL match, it's basically the toughest opening matchup you can have. So I think FaZe will get the job done, and I'm just going to say FaZe 3-1.
I want to pick New York because I've I picked them a lot in the CDL this season, but FaZe is a very difficult opponent, and it's even worse when this is Hydra's first ever CDL match if he ends up debuting. Even if not, New York has not beaten FaZe this season with DiamondCon and Mac in the lineup, so I don't think it'll start here. So I'll say Atlanta as well. And then the final match, Toronto versus Dallas. Toronto, they'll have played on Thursday against the Mutineers, and I believe this is the Empire's second match as well because they'll have played on Thursday against Paris. So, I mean, we both assume that they're going to be coming off of wins coming into this match. So, who do you have at Ultra versus Empire?
I gotta go with the Ultra. Obviously they just won the major, but not only that, they were the team that beat Dallas in the losers bracket final and knocked the Empire out of the stage 2 major. So you could argue that might have been momentum based because Toronto was coming off of playing earlier on Sunday against the Rocker, and they beat the Rocker, and then they went into their match against the Empire. They beat the Empire to go into their match against FaZe, which they won. However you think about momentum playing a factor or not, they still were able to beat Dallas. And most notably, Ultra lost the first hard point against Minnesota. Then they won 3 maps in a row. Going into the Dallas matchup, Dallas takes the first hard point and Toronto wins 3 maps in a row. So I'm not really sure how much you can pin that on momentum, but either way, Toronto just most recently took them down. Neither team's changing rosters, so I am going to stick with Toronto, and I'll say 3-1 again.
I'll say Dallas for this one because, I mean, I think it's a very cool thing that Toronto was able to bounce back after losing the opening hard point, but that is not a recipe for success to go down 0-1. Like, statistically, the odds of you winning that series go down by quite a bit when you go down in the first game. And Dallas is a good hardpoint team, so if they say win the first hardpoint of a series, there's a very good chance that they would win a second hardpoint as well. And I don't think that Toronto is like FaZe in the sense of they're so dominant in a single game mode that they can make up the deficit no matter what. I mean, I'm open to be proven wrong, but I think I need like a bigger sample size than just the Stage 2 Major because we saw Ultra struggle at times with insight in their roster during Stage 2 group play. So I want to see a little bit more, and I think Dallas will come out and they'll have learned from their loss to Toronto from the major. So yeah, that concludes our Stage 3 Week 1 predictions. If there's anybody in the chat that wants to ask a few questions or suggest like a quick topic or something, we can take that. And like you said earlier, people people are pretty, I don't know if upset is the word or just like dumbfounded that sliding seems to be slide canceling seems to be like removed accidentally or purposefully, but at least the first like 8 tweets on my timeline are all about slide canceling, which means I probably need to get more people on Twitter that aren't about God, in my opinion. But yeah, so it's interesting. Trem says,
He said sliding is gone. I just saw 300 bots. So our inside reporter Tremor here, with the latest scoop on the Ego Chall podcast that sliding is gone. He also said FFR still sucks, which is big sad for him and me. We both like the FAMAS a lot. Slide canceling is buns, but you can still slide same speed, just can't stand up fast immediately after. You can jump to standing after sliding, though. Krieg seems slightly worse. So that's your immediate take from Ego Chall correspondent Justin Tremor Limoges,
aka Jetpacker J, aka Coach. Yeah. So which team benefits most from their roster changes? That was a question Tremor asked. Do you want to take a crack at this?
I guess there's so many ways we can tackle this, right? obviously, if Hydra, we don't know if that's confirmed, but if Hydra comes out and just absolutely fries like some people are expecting, you would have to probably give it to New York. But then you could look at a team like London, right, where they're literally at the bottom of the standings, and even if they don't go undefeated in stage 3, if they're able to win a couple group play matches, they're getting those CDL points and building their way up. So you could look at that as London benefiting the most in the sense of just improving their stock a little bit with Zaptius if that change works out. I don't know. I think it's tough. Obviously, it'll be easier to answer that once we know all the changes that are confirmed and we see these teams some in action. But I will say Paris for now, just for the sake that we know Temp is definitely in the lineup. And I touched on it earlier last episode and this episode. I think that bringing Temp in could help the team from a role standpoint overall, getting Scraps back on that flex and the sub-duo with Classic and Temp. So yeah, I will say Paris because it's the safe answer right now since we know that change has actually happened.
Yeah, I would like to say New York simply because I think Hydra is a good player to like. He's probably one of the best challengers players. At least like I don't know, just from like I don't really pay attention to challengers, so it's hard to like quantify like the value of Hydra, but like I mean, there was a reason why every team was interested in him before season 2. So I think to that point, I think New York could definitely improve from their stage 2 major placing, but I also think there's a ceiling to how much they can improve considering they're already in 4th in CDL standings, actually in 3rd, like you said, with Optic, and there's not that much room to grow in that sense. So I'll say Florida. I think Havoc coming in, like Florida and Paris for me are in the same boat of like they are good teams. Like they're good teams that have played poorly. Florida's 6-9 this season. They've won 46% of their maps, and Awakening has looked like one of the best players in the world at times. Sky's had a ridiculous performance, or he's actually had a few really good performances this season. Neptune is an up-and-coming rookie. So I think there's just a missing piece. I don't know if replacing Havoc with Slacked, or Slacked with Havoc, excuse me, is the best move, but it might just be the move like where they go from where they are now, 9th, to say 6th or something, and that's a huge improvement because that gets you out of not making champs and gets you into a little bit of a safer spot heading into stage 4. Yeah. So unless there's any other questions or you have anything else to add, I think we can wrap the show.
Yeah, I don't have anything. Trem did actually just add that he has in his bio now that he's the Ego Chall Podcast HC. That could stand for hard carry. It could stand for head coach in his case. So I don't know. But yeah, I don't really have anything to add. Obviously, we talked about a lot tonight. So I'm certainly excited to see how some of these new rosters shake up, and even how some of the teams that didn't make changes, how they're able to adjust to whatever meta changes we might see. Regardless, stage 3, really coming up, less than 2 days away now. So exciting time to be a Call of Duty fan, and I can't wait to watch.
Agreed. Subscribe on whatever platform you're listening or watching. This will be up on YouTube, the complete VOD. You can also watch the VOD on Twitch if you like, and you can follow along with like the replay chat and everything. So there's that option as well. But we'll be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all other podcasting platforms. Make sure to give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Yeah, so pretty much, I think we've been doing this this is our 10th episode. We've almost always done this on Tuesday, except for the pre-major show, because the major starts a day before. We usually do that on Mondays. But yeah, so if you follow along, you follow the Twitch or subscribe to YouTube. We usually do this on Tuesday nights, 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The best time, the only time that you need to really worry about. So yeah, Tuesdays is a really good night to tune into this channel. So make sure to follow us on Twitter. We'll announce when the shows are. If there's any changes in the schedule, we'll make sure to update you guys as well. You can also follow Bink on Twitter at jbink with 2Ks, and you can follow me on Twitter at presbyers. So yeah, see you guys, and take it away, Bink.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, send the chow.